Nitro.
You realize people are paying you to bury people.
I know. I don't want to come across like I'm biased. Anyway, I'll talk about it at the end. Otherwise, I'm going to go off.
So they announced that Hulk Hogan and Dennis Rodman will, in fact, team up at Bash on the Beach in July. And the opponents were not yet named. They cut backstage. Now, this next skit is going to take me about a minute to explain what happened. On TV, it felt like about 8 seconds. A limo pulls up. Elizabeth gets out. Randy Savage starts to get out. Dallas Page runs up, and so Savage hides in the limo and slams the door shut. So Page goes to kick the window in. This takes him 3 tries. Eventually he gets the glass broken. He opens the door. He goes in to go after Macho Man when Elizabeth runs up and slams the door shut on Page. Page goes down. The limo peels off. Page is left writhing on the ground, and Liz is left standing there. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It all happened very quickly.
Oh, I thought there was a point to all of that you were saying here.
The point is there's too much happening. It happens fast.
I see.
I had to stop the show to write in detail what went on.
All right. Well, let me tell you and everybody else the point of all of this. There's 2 things on this show. One is this, where Diamond Dallas Page goes backstage and he kicks in the window of a limo. A real glass window, by the way, not a fake glass window. And the other is at the end of the show where Sting straps himself to the cable. He straps Diamond Dallas Page to the cable, and we'll talk about later, they both get pulled up to the ceiling. Now, granted, hindsight is always 20/20. But as this wrestling war is escalating, I mean, we can just watch on TV every week all of these things that are going to lead to disaster. I mean, playing around with glass. I mean, yeah, Diamond Dallas Page didn't get hurt here. But, I mean, watching it, you had to know at the time, you can't be messing around with glass. Just like all those times that they messed around with fire and then eventually somebody got burned really bad. You know what's going to happen. So, obviously, eventually, Goldberg nearly sliced his whole goddamn arm off, punching his way through a limo window. And there's a million stories about it. He was supposed to have something in his hand, and he forgot it. But it doesn't matter. It was real glass whether he had something in his hand or not. And Owen Hart, the whole Owen Hart death, when you read about the death and the clamp and everything else involved in that, and you think about this guy Sting, at the end of the show, not only clamped himself in by himself, there was nobody else down there to strap him in. He also had to strap in Diamond Dallas Page, and both of them got pulled to the ceiling. I mean, this is madness. Complete madness.
Yeah, I'll have more to say about that when we get there. The opening match was Ultimate Dragon and Juventud Guerrera and Super Calo versus Psychosis and La Parka and Silver King. This was a clusterfuck. Just bodies flying everywhere. No one had any idea what was going on. No one had any idea who was on whose team. The announcers had no clue of anything. The guys were moving 8,000 miles an hour, and I think they screwed up half their stuff, but they were moving so fast, no one could tell what was hit and what was missed. There was actually a boring chant in here, believe it or not.
Oh my God, there was one in the next match too.
Yep. And my favorite part of this is there's so much going on, and so much haywire, and so much just traffic. The ref is just Brian Hildebrand, and towards the end, he just gives up. And he goes back to what he thinks is a neutral corner, although it's hard to tell at that point. And he just stands back and watches, and you just watch his head go. It's like he's watching ping pong or tennis, just jerking back and forth constantly. And he's doing his best to try to stay out of the way. Finally, there's a bunch of bodies hitting the floor, and then Dragon taps out Psychosis with a Dragon Sleeper. As I wrote here, the flustercuck to end all flustercucks. I
love this match. It was kind of a cluster, but I've seen some WCW matches that are just absolute disasters. I thought this one was actually kind of amazing. I mean, Dragon fucked up some spot in the corner, but he kind of saved it by grabbing his leg, and then he started running, so you knew it was a fuck up. But, I mean, there were all sorts of crazy dives. There were all sorts of big moves. Monkey flip by La Parka, nearly killed himself in the rope. Super Calo with a springboard senton over the top to the floor. Larry's high spot, which has belittled the wrestlers. Claimed that he wrestled Dr. Wagner and would beat his son Silver King as well. Meanwhile, Silver King is just looking so awesome here in the ring. Just a crazy match, and I thought it was awesome and the best thing on the show.
So then there was more after the match when Parker went after Kalo with a chair, and then it just stopped. You liked that a lot more than I did. Lex Luger joined Gene Okerlund for a promo. He said he and the Giant wanted to take on Hogan and Rodman. He reminded everyone that Hogan had not defended his title since February. Now, we were burying the European title earlier, which is about the same time.
Actually, I think Hogan has defended the championship more recently than that European title.
Yeah. But,
although not anymore, not after tonight.
Was the non-title match, because as Luger explained, because he had not defended the title in so long, the WCW was forcing Hogan to wrestle Luger in a non-title match. I'm not really sure how that's that much punishment, but whatever.
Well, you may have misheard it. He actually fucked up, and he said that he was going to be defending the title tonight. And it ended up being a non-title match. And so everybody got confused.
We had an earlier today, Mike Tenay meeting with Roddy Piper and Ric Flair as they arrived in a limo, and they said they did not want to wait for the pay-per-view. They wanted to fight the Outsiders tonight. So that was going to be the main event of the show.
You did a very good job cleaning up what was a totally nonsensical promo by Roddy Piper.
I am long past the point of trying to decipher what he actually says and just trying to see what is the nut of what he's saying and try to get to that.
That's right.
Alex Wright versus Chris Jericho.
I got to talk about this. They noted that Jericho had just come back from the top of the Super Juniors tournament, which takes place same time every year, by the way. And Jericho did, on Twitter today, put over Will Ospreay, who won the tournament this year. So that's a callback, I guess. Alex Wright is now a full-fledged heel. And as a heel, he is a total mid-card geek, but he entertains the hell out of me with his dancing and his goofy mannerisms. He's got a new one. He does that goofy dance, which, by the way, when you watch it now and you recall that it actually started out as a babyface deal, it's hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
He does his goofy dance, and now he shakes his ass on top of everything else. And these guys, it's funny because they were working their asses off. It did go too long for what it was, which was a totally random match between Chris Jericho and Alex Wright. But the fans were chanting boring during this match. And I don't know. There's a lot of stuff you could chant about this match, but it wasn't boring. And they were trying very, very hard. And Alex Wright pinned him with a high cross. Or Jericho did a high cross, and Alex Wright rolled through, got his feet on the ropes for the pin, did his goofy dance afterwards. I couldn't believe people were chanting boring for this. And the opener.
You and I watched different shows, I think, because I was with the fans. Here's what this match was. Alex Wright was playing the part of, just to pick a name, let's say Ivan Koloff. And Chris Jericho was playing Vernon Deaton.
What the fuck?
And Alex Wright beat him up for what felt like 45 minutes. He beat him and beat him and beat him, and Jericho would do like a roll-up. And then Wright beat him and beat him and beat him, and Jericho would do like a backslide or whatever. And this goes forever and ever and ever. And it's all just Alex Wright beating up Chris Jericho. And then Alex Wright wins. All I can think was, no wonder Jericho wanted out.
So let me get this straight. You are comparing Alex Wright to Ivan Koloff and Chris Jericho to Vernon Deaton.
The names don't matter. The point is, Alex Wright was put into this match like a WCW Saturday Night Superstar, and Chris Jericho was put into this match like like an NWA Championship Wrestling Superstar, and Jericho was put in this match like an NWA Championship Jobber. And Jericho's job was to lose for 99% of this match and then lose at the end.
Huh. Well, they're trying to get this Alex Wright guy over for a week.
But it's not working, because he's not very good.
You got to keep trying.
He's adequate. Yes, I thought this also sucked. Malia Haka versus Akira Hokuto. All I wrote about this was they did some stuff. Ono distracted Haka, and Hokuto hit a Northern Lights bomb for the win.
All I got out of this was the fans were more tolerant for this match than they were for the previous two matches. That's impossible.
Well, they botched less stuff than the Luchadors, and they didn't go 4 hours like Alex Wright and Chris Jericho, so I can see that. So afterwards, Hokuto goes to drop another Northern Lights bomb on Haka, and Medusa runs out to make the save, and she makes the save with a series of German suplexes, bridging for the pin on each one.
She hits the German, she does a bridge, and then she uses her arm to make sure that her opponent's shoulders are down for a moment, and then she picks her up to do it again, and she does it 3 times exactly like that.
Yes.
That was so weird.
Oakland brought the Steiners out for a promo. They cannot believe they have been screwed out of the titles by the NWO. Now they had to go through all the teams in the roster again. Harlem Heat came out. They jibber-jabbered. They brawled. They were running all over the place fighting, and finally Geeks came out to separate them. Conan versus Steve McMichael.
I got to talk about this for a second. Mongo is on his way to the ring, and a man flies in out of nowhere, like Superman, and he takes out Mongo. It's Kevin Greene. Kevin Greene, they're in the aisle, by the way. Mongo's down. He's on his way down to the ring. He's in the aisle, and this dude flies in and attacks him. They have a wild brawl, and Mongo beats his ass, leaves him laying, and then he looks at the camera defiantly, and he keeps on heading to the ring because
he points the ring because he still wants to fight Conan.
That's right, because he's a badass. And Kevin Greene jumps him again. All the Geeks run down to break it up. I thought Mongo, when you think of the 4 Horsemen, the elite group, you really don't think of Mongo in there. But as the years go by, and especially when you hear Flair talk about what a partier Mongo was after the shows, it really is kind of like, you know what? This man was a horseman. This man was one of the Andersons here in this little deal. He got jumped, he beat the guy's ass, and he just kept walking to the ring because he wanted to fight tonight, and he didn't give a shit what was going on. He was so great here.
Now, that's only half of what happened. Because eventually, the Geeks pulled Kevin Greene to the back. Eventually, they pull Mongo apart, and Mongo is no longer fighting with Kevin Greene. And then they cut to the ring, and there are 3 things lying on the mat. 2 of them are the separate halves of a broom that has been broken in half, and the third is Conan. The announcers had 0 idea what had happened. Right in front of them, mind you. No idea. Larry suggested Conan had fainted. Perhaps he fainted onto a broom, which then broke.
He was sweeping up the ring, and he fainted and broke the broom.
So Mongo gives up. He doesn't get his fight tonight. He goes to the back. Then they come back to the ring. Nick Patrick is looking right into the camera, waiting for his cue. They cut to him. There's, the awkward pause that WWE does after promos?
Oh, yeah.
This is the awkward pause before he spoke. There's an awkward pause, and he says, "There is no match. It's a no contest." Thanks, Nick. And then here I wrote, what an overrushed mess of a show this has been so far. Eric Bischoff and Hollywood Hogan came out for a promo. I don't know what movie Hogan was doing where he had to shave, but he apparently shaved clean-shaven, totally just barefaced, then grew back just his mustache, and then he had no beard, and so it looked like they painted a beard on him with shoe polish.
That's exactly what happened.
And I think, up to this point, this is my favorite thing on the whole show. The world champion, the biggest star in wrestling, is out there with a painted-on beard, pretending it's normal.
That's Hulk Hogan.
So he says Luger is not in good enough shape to wrestle him, so he's going to pose and flex instead. And so he does, until Luger calmly comes out.
And shakes his ass. He stole Alex Wright's dance.
He has done the ass shaking thing before, but yes, Hogan flexed and shook his ass. And Hogan was always the best at when he was a heel and there was somebody behind him and he had to do the slow burn reaction. Why is everyone cheering and pointing? I don't understand. And he turns around and sees Luger. And he says, "Lex, I don't know if you came out here to see what a real body looked like, but you're not going to beat me in the ring. You should leave before I destroy you." And then before Lex could even speak, Bischoff runs down Lex. Finally,
I did like how both of the heels, their main line was, "If you ever want a shot at me, I suggest that you start working out."
Oh, yeah. Very important that he watches his nutrition and training. So eventually Lex punches Bischoff. Hogan goes after Lex. Luger knocks Hogan out of the ring. The Outsiders and Six run out. They're standing by Hogan's side, and the ref comes down and the bell rings, and the match was on. So it's Hulk Hogan versus Lex Luger in what we eventually learned was a non-title match. Hogan's beating him up for a while. Lex starts his comeback. The Wolfpack tries to attack for the DQ, but he fights off all three of them, turns around, puts the rack on Hogan, and Hogan, for what is quite possibly the first time in his entire career, submits. And this ref, when Hogan gives up, the ref calls for the bell by high-stepping in place, like doing high knees, popping his fingers like 6 guns.
Oh, yeah.
This is the best call for the bell ever. So Luger has just submitted Hulk Hogan, and the Wolfpack jumps him. Hogan starts hitting him with leg drop after leg drop after leg drop. The second hour power goes off. More legs are being dropped. This goes on and on for a long time. But in the end, it didn't matter. Lex proved, even if they tried to interfere, he could tap out Hulk Hogan.
I thought this was so great. I was disappointed that A, it aired at the top of the hour. B, it kind of felt rushed. C, Luger got a big submission over Hulk Hogan, which should have been like a real big thing, but they had to get Hulk's heat back immediately and lay out Lex, and then it was like to the back, and we went to the next segment. It just felt like this could have been so much more with all the heat that Hogan had and the NWO had, and Luger submitting the guy. It just kind of felt like they just did it and then moved on. There was no impact to it, ironically.
They did take it away. They gave him 0 seconds to celebrate this. He was down on the mat suddenly immediately, and the post-down beat-down went too long.
Yeah, it's like, why did they... I mean, I don't know. It just...
Well, I have a guess. I suspect Hogan said, if I'm going to lose via submission to this man, then I must immediately pound him into the earth afterwards.
Well, I'm sure there's that. I'm just wondering why they made the decision to even do this, because it just felt like nothing when it was over, and it should have felt like everything.
Yeah.
And then, so they do this post-match brawl, and Hogan drops the big leg on Luger. And, of course, the big leg is Hulk Hogan's finish. And then he drops another leg, and then another leg, and then another leg, and another leg, and another leg. They said he dropped like 8 legs on the guy. Now, if you imagine that a man's finishing move is so devastating that it can keep a man down for 3 seconds and maybe longer, that's a pretty devastating move. To drop it on a guy 7 or 8 times, the man should be near death. And they bring the geeks down to the ring, and they grab Lex by the legs, and they just yank his ass out of the ring.
Yeah.
Out of there. I was like, what the fuck?
If you are a cross-injured person, I know you're trying to help, but don't drag them anywhere by the feet.
Oh, my God. Not even like a neck brace or a backboard or nothing. It was just like, grab his legs and yank that dude out of the ring.
Oakland brings J.J. Dillon out for an interview.
This was a good JJ interview right here, Vinny. I hope you apologize for all you've said about JJ of late. He was good here.
This is a much better JJ interview than we have seen. He announces Randy Savage is being fined $50,000 for attacking JJ last week. He said they had considered a suspension for Randy, but they did not want to rob Dallas Page of the opportunity to get his hands on Savage at the Great American Bash. He announces that Page Savage 2 will now be no contest, no DQ, falls count anywhere, there must be a winner. And by the way, we talked about the dangerous stuff they were doing with Dallas Page in the show, kicking in windows and taking cables to the ceiling. He was main eventing the next pay-per-view.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Savage appears in the crowd, says he would have no problem paying a $100,000 fine. So Page comes out. He calls Savage Big Mouth. There's in the fight right now.
Fighting words.
Savage accepts this challenge, and he makes his way down to ringside. Now, I don't want anyone to get hurt. And I think it makes sense to have security holding fans back when guys are going through the crowd or whatever. But when watching Randy Savage literally have to fight his way through this crowd, and everyone's trying to get a hand on him, and his shirt gets torn, this looks so awesome. And he jumps the barricade, and Page comes flying off the apron onto him, and they're brawling, and they immediately go to a break. It was fun. Should have been more of a brawl, but the show had turned around by this point.
I love the idea that he challenged... Savage is in the crowd, and Diamond Dallas Page challenges him to a fight, and I'm thinking, Savage ain't going to accept because he's a heel. But then he did. And it didn't take anything away from it because Randy Savage's character, even though Randy Savage's character is a heel, his character is a crazed madman.
Yeah.
And so, of course, he's going to come down and go through the crowd. And the thing about going through the crowd, too, is I don't know what would happen if somebody punched Roman Reigns. I suspect that Roman Reigns could hold his own and would probably scare the hell out of everybody around him. But I think these fans knew, it's okay to grab Savage, maybe pull on his shirt a little bit, but don't try anything because this dude will go crazy. This guy will lose his mind on you. And so he had
if I punch Randy Savage, he's going to wipe out this entire section.
Oh, yeah. Savage was amazing.
Me and Marshall did the road report, told some joke about Jerry Springer. I don't know. Jeff Jarrett versus Dean Malenko. I laughed because they're doing this like a pre-match stare-down thing where Jarrett's pointing his finger in Dean's chest and Dean is swiping it away. Meanwhile, Shivani's talking about how much they respect each other. They had a fun technical match, and Jarrett hits a top rope suplex. They're both down selling. The ref checks on Jarrett when who should appear but Eddie Guerrero. He comes through the crowd with his arm in a sling. He hits a frog splash on Dean. Then he takes his sling off, leaves it on Dean, and he leaves. Ref turns around, just sees Dean laid out with a sling on him, doesn't know what happened. And so Jarrett puts the figure 4 on, and Dean submits. So Jeff Jarrett is the new U.S. champion via Eddie Guerrero interference.
As we watch these shows back, there's guys that some of them I knew were good, but I didn't realize how good they were. Dean Malenko is a great example. Like, I always knew Dean Malenko was good, but watching him in 2016, I realized this guy was unbelievable. And there are other guys that I watch, and I realize, you know what? I didn't give this guy enough credit when I was younger. He's a much better worker than I thought he was. Do you remember in the 90s when Matt Farmer was always on me about Jeff Jarrett?
Matt was a bigger fan of Jarrett than you were then. That is true.
And how Jarrett was so awesome, and Jarrett was better than Shawn Michaels, and all these crazy things he said about Jeff Jarrett. No disrespect to Jeff Jarrett. But looking back in 2016, he's exactly what I thought he was in 1997. He was a very good worker. He was not better than Shawn Michaels. I still, in 2016, don't have any idea what Matt Farmer was talking about.
I think, except for the better than Shawn Michaels part, I think I would be more on that side. I thought he was very good.
He was very good. I never said he wasn't very good.
He was not better than Shawn Michaels.
He was not better than Shawn Michaels. He was not like an all-time great worker. He was a very good wrestler.
I did watch this thinking, boy, that having a match with Jarrett would be fun.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to have a match with the guy.
Yeah.
I'd rather wrestle Jeff Jarrett than Dean Malenko. At least I know he could keep up.
Wow.
It's not even like a negative. I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that Dean Malenko could carry me. But I'd have to work a hell of a lot harder than a match with Jeff Jarrett. I'd probably get a better reaction wrestling Jeff Jarrett.
Okerlund interviewed Jimmy Hart in the Faces of Fear. Now, as I recall, Chris Benoit wants a match with Kevin Sullivan. And so Okerlund said, first you have to beat the Barbarian. And Benoit did. And then Jimmy Hart said, Ming, now there'll be a step 2, you'll have to beat Ming. And then next week, I'll reveal step 3.
Yeah.
So he's out there the Faces of Fear. He says, it's time to reveal that third step. And the third step is Kevin Sullivan.
Because you see, he must beat Kevin Sullivan in order to get a match with Kevin Sullivan.
It's like getting a SAG card.
Yes.
You have to get a job before you get a card, and you have to get a card before you get a job. So they were in Boston. Sullivan talks about being home at last and says Benoit's taken everything from him. He's not going to take his hometown. There's Benoit to come fight right now. Benoit does. And this is actually awesome because for about 10 or 15 seconds, the heels put on pretenses of letting this be a one-on-one fight. Sullivan wanted to fight Benoit by himself. Benoit comes out there trading punches, and first the guys stop and watch. And then Jackie jumps on Benoit's back, but Ming steps up to pull her off because they want to let Sullivan settle himself. And then Ming turns around and puts Benoit in the Tongan death grip, and it becomes a 5-on-1 beatdown, including Jimmy Hart. And all I can think was, thank God the Horsemen are here to watch Benoit's back. So the main event, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall versus Ric Flair and Roddy Piper.
And may I?
Have at it.
I don't want to come across biased against Kevin Nash. I know I say a lot of things about Kevin Nash, and I'm going to say more about him here. But I'm just trying to be fair, and I'm trying to be a reporter here. So, after this match, Roddy Piper and Ric Flair versus Hall and Nash, non-title match. After the match, there is a dressing room altercation, where Kevin Nash goes to Roddy Piper's dressing room, and he bangs on the door. Roddy Piper's lackey opens the door. Nash storms in. He pie-faces Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper tries to kick out his bad leg. All of these guys come in. They separate everybody. And Kevin Nash's whole issue, the reason that he's had this issue with Roddy Piper, they'd had some issues here and there. It was a little bit like Brett and Sean, but not that kind of heat, and it hadn't gone on for that long. They'd not been on the same page for a little while, but Nash apparently was just so mad about this main event and how horrible it was and how Roddy Piper had ruined the match that he had to go in there and start a fight. Now, in The Observer, Dave called this maybe the worst match of the year. Clearly, standards have changed between 1997 and 2016. I have seen 1,000 television matches exactly this bad over the last decade. This was not one of the worst matches I've ever seen. Furthermore, as I watch this match, Roddy Piper is old, and he's got one hip. But was he really that bad in this match? No. And when you watch the match, you can just see that Kevin Nash has got a chip on his shoulder. He's annoyed like the whole time. Like everything that happens, he's upset with. Now, they did have once they did the finish here, which was, of course, the NWO running in a DQ, they had this big post-match deal. I guess the match was supposed to go 12 minutes, and just like last week, somebody got tired. Roddy Piper called for the finish early. They only went 6 minutes, so they had to extend this brawl here at the end, which meant we got 6 minutes of this fucker ringing the bell 1,000 times. 9 million. Yeah, there's 9 million people running in. But the point of this is, during that schmoz, Roddy Piper and Kevin Nash were together in a corner doing something again. And maybe that's what happened. I don't know. I will say, to be fair, to be impartial, as a wrestler, there were many times where I had matches, and in the middle of the match, I thought, this fucking match sucks. I am so angry. If I could beat this guy's ass for real, I would. It's all his fault. I'm pissed off, and I'm in a bad mood. And then later I go back and watch it, and you know what? It wasn't that bad. And maybe that was a situation here that when it was happening, Nash thought it was 1,000 times worse than it actually was, especially in the post-match brawl where nobody was paying any attention to Kevin Nash and Roddy Piper anyway. Nobody was even watching them when all of this went down, if something went down then. So I can understand that maybe Nash got a little bit worked up about something that wasn't quite as bad as it seemed. Still, I never went to somebody's locker room and got in their face and pie-faced them ever in my whole career. This whole thing with Nash and Piper here, it's so unprofessional. Like, it's amazing to... You watched the match, Vinny. It was not that bad.
It was every Raw main event tag you would see these days. I just thought it was funny because this was... I don't know, maybe Nash was angry before the match started, but this was like the Alex Wright match where they took 99% of the match. In fact, this was even 100%. Because they were building up with the hot tag when they did the DQ. So there wasn't even a comeback. But yeah, they did a match. It was forgettable.
Yeah, that's it. It was forgettable. Yeah, it wasn't the worst match of the year. It wasn't horrible.
No.
It was like Nash was just looking for an excuse to start a fight.
Well, that's possible too. And now the post-match was much worse than the match itself. And if that's due to the match being cut short, then I kind of understand Nash being angry. But they had hundreds of men out there fighting, Glacier and Mortis and Wrath. I did enjoy it. It only lasted the series about 4 seconds, but at one point there was a three-way brawl between Kevin Greene, Mongo, and Scott Norton, which was so manly.
Of course they would end up together.
Yes. Sullivan's out there in the Faces of Fear, and Benoit. So Savage, it's such a mess. Do you remember the tag match with Samito, where he got the hot tag and hit an empty ring?
Oh, yeah.
And shouted, "I'm a house of fire, and there's no one to fight."
There's nobody to hit.
There's nobody to hit. That's what Savage did here. He goes running out there, rolls into the ropes, stands up, and just looks around, and has got nothing to do. So then Paige comes out. Paige comes out to jump Savage. And Hall and Nash are watching. And very briefly, they make it a 3-on-1. It's Hall and Nash and Savage against Paige. And I don't know if Paige said, "Go away, I've got to do a spot," or if they just got bored. But in the middle of this, Hall and Nash just walk away. And they walk to the corner, and they're just having a chat as Dallas Page lays out Randy Savage with the face buster. So Hogan comes out, and he starts whacking people with his belt. And Page gets knocked out of the ring to the floor, and finally Sting descends from the ceiling. And we talked about this earlier. Now, the last time we saw Sting do this, where he descended, did some stuff, and then reascended, the whole time he was getting ready to reascend, the camera zoomed in on everyone else. So Craig and I suggested maybe off camera, 2 or 3 guys would run up and help him get hooked up into his harness.
I told you, dude. I tried to tell you.
Well, Sting descends. He is standing over Page's body. He's pointing his bat at everyone. The crowd's going nuts. And now it's time to go back up. So what Sting has to do, he has to hook one clip, and I stress that, one clip on his own harness. He has to hook one clip onto Page's harness. And oh, by the way, he is also fighting off members of the NWO with a baseball bat at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
This was completely insane.
Nuts.
There was one point where it appeared the cable hanging from the ceiling was literally wrapped around his own neck, and he's still fighting to get free and fight guys off with a bat. And eventually, he is able to get them hooked up, and he gives the sign, and the cable pulls them up, and even watching this 19 years later and knowing everyone was fine here, this scared the bejesus out of me.
Oh, yeah.
So, that was Nitro.
Don't ever do this cable stuff, everybody. It was just so crazy. I mean, God, every time he does it, he's got to yank on the thing, and he's got to wait for them to pull it up, and he's busy swinging his bat at guys. It's just crazy. It's madness. But that was Nitro.
And what do you get out of it?
He got nothing out of it. It was cool, and everybody popped.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, that's Nitro, everybody. That's Retro Raw Nitro. We're going to be wrapping it up here, but I want to remind everybody that tomorrow, Wednesday, is the NXT TakeOver event. And
that's right.
God only knows what's going to happen because there's a lot of time between now and the draft. But there are going to be 2 separate rosters, and they need talent. So I think that tomorrow is going to be a very, very newsworthy NXT TakeOver event. And Dave and I will be covering it on Wednesday night. Vinny and I will be covering it on Thursday night, as well as our weekly appearance from Granny. Everything is largely unscheduled this week, except the Filthy Tom show, I believe, will be Friday now. I think that is going to be the plan. So there will be a Filthy Tom Lawler show this week, but obviously it didn't take place Monday. But we will get that down. He's got a lot to say, everybody. He's got a lot to say, so we will make sure that we bring that to you. And that is it from here. I want to thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you again after a while.
Good night.